Holla ballers, it's Preacher, and today I'm bringing you the changes that have occurred to your classes in patch 5.1. Blizzard's still changing things. We've already had hot fixes as of filming this video. I've included them into this overview for you. You can select your guides, go ahead and look at your class. There's not been many changes, so most of the content that we've discussed in patch 5.05 still stands, but there have been some changes to some classes which will be of note. So without any further ado, let us begin. The Hunters. Hunters have had aspects of the Fox removed, and literally you can now just cast Steady Shot, all that kind of stuff while you are moving. So you can do it all the time without having to worry about switching your aspects. That is a nice little bonus there. Steady Shot, Cobra Shot, and Barrage can also just be cast on the move, okay? There's been some buffs to the Marksman Hunters, which I'm really happy about. Marksman Hunters were languishing down a bit. It's one of the most fun specs for the Hunters as far as I'm concerned. Careful Aim now increases the crit chance of Steady Shot and Aim Shot by 75% on targets who are now above 80% health instead of 90%. It's a move in the right direction, but still not quite on the money. We're looking for more stuff overall DPS and looking for stuff in more of the execute phase to be more effective. This is going to buff Mark's DPS and help with trash and such like, but overall I don't expect this to move Marksman up into the top tier. The other major change was to Lynx Rush. Lynx Rush has been changed. It is now a bleed that stacks over 15 seconds and stacks up to 9 times. Is this a buff to Lynx Rush? We're not sure yet. There's a lot of numbers being run. I imagine it's actually going to work out about the same. They just didn't want it to be as bursty as Lynx Rush was. They just wanted it to be more steady damage. I expect the damage to remain relatively the same. Bestial Wrath was changed as well, but that's not a major effect for us in PvE. It's just more of a PvP fix. Moving on to the mages. The mages have had some buffs to Arcane. Yes, Arcane Charge has been increased to 25% of the damage buff per charge. The Arcane Blast mana cost, when affected by Arcane Charge, is now plus 75% instead of 125%. And Rune of Power now no longer has a cooldown. Arcane did need a damage buff, there's no doubt about that. I actually destroyed on the Fire Mage and the Frost Mage in comparison to the Arcane Mage. However, this is just still a very boring spec, a flat-out damage buff, simply from the Arcane Charge, and now easier to control our mana, more easy than it was previously. I will say that this mana cost change is a little bit more helpful for our 5-mans. Where we were struggling to keep Rune of Power down all the time with tanks running around and so on and so forth. Frost Bomb was nerfed. It will now detonate after 6 seconds instead of 5. The detonation speed is still going to be affected by haste. That's okay. It's an extra second. It's just rebalancing out. You shouldn't see too much change there in terms of the bombs. Frost Bomb was more of a PvP issue, so it's give it an extra second before it does its massive amounts of damage. That's cool. The other one I wanted to talk about was Combustion. This was rebalanced and hotfixed again today. Combustion is now purely based off Ignite, not the Pyroblast dot. It's entirely based on the Ignite dot. It's not a major change, it's more that there was some double dipping going on with the Pyroblast dots and the Ignite dot. So it's based permanently now just off Ignite. This shouldn't change anything for PvEers at all. It should still be exactly the same, okay? Because most of our big Ignites come from a Pyroblast crit anyway. So those of you who are clever with your Combustion will quite literally be always waiting for a Pyroblast crit in order to fire that off. So you shouldn't see much change at all. The monks got changed. We were expecting this. We spoke about this in the guides. We were expecting monks to get changed. The most changes occurred to the Mistweaver. That was entirely expected. Nothing to be worried about there. Mana cost of all spells has been increased, but it still shouldn't be a problem. They're just rebalancing them around a bit. Enveloping Mist was also reduced. There's quite a few spells that have actually just been dropped in the level you attain them. A lot of monks complaining that they didn't get good healing spells too much later in the leveling, which was a bit poor. So they've moved things down, like Enveloping Mist, now available at level 16, where previously it was available at level 34. They have nerfed Chi Burst and Chi Wave. This is more of a PvP balance as well. There was a lot of leveling monks, especially, who were getting massively overpowered heals from Chi Burst and Chi Wave, and its damage was pretty cool as well. So they've nerfed that healing down. It was essentially a huge heal for the leveling monks. You now have a chance equal to your crit chance to generate double the amount of Mana Tea charge. So what they've done is they put a little bit more focus on your Mana Tea, and when you are going to use that rather than just having decent healing all the time and decent mana, and also using the glyph. The glyph became pretty standard in raiding. They wanted it to be much more effective, and choosing when to use Mana Tea much better. Renewing Mist now only travels to 2 additional targets, so a nerf to Renewing Mist. This again was expected. We knew this was coming. This is just a balancing issue. Don't look at it as nerfs. This is just bringing people back in line. What they've done though is reduce the mana cost of Soothing Mist accordingly, so people can be a little bit more care and attentive towards their single target heals rather than just spanning Renewing Mist and Uplift all the time. Haste was changed. This is the one that's going to affect your gearing. Haste for Mistweavers is now 50% more effective. Expect me to do a video on the changes to the haste and how your haste caps work coming up, okay? That's going to be coming up. The other change to the monks that's worth talking about is, for the Windwalkers, the Tiger power provided by Tiger Palm now reduces target armor by 30% with just a simple application. We did talk about how Tiger Power was just a pain in the ass, especially in 5-mans. Wasn't too bad in raiding, but for 5-mans and leveling and stuff, Tiger Power is just a pain in the ass. They've made it so it's just had to hit it once. They might as well scrap it for all I'm concerned. It's pointless just to have this ability we have to press every now and again to get this 30% buff. It's not worthwhile. Just roll it into our DPS as far as I'm concerned. But still, a better change, a much more better quality of life change for the Windwalker monks there, which is pretty nice. The Paladins have just got a flat-out healing buff to their AoE. Light of Dawn healing has been increased by another 5%, and Holy Prison will now always heal the 5 closest allies with the lowest health. Nothing much to say there. It doesn't change your gameplay, doesn't change your gearing whatsoever. Do note that Hand of Salvation has been changed. This ability now just removes all threat. For those of you who are clever enough to use your Hand of Salvation against those tanks who require you to use Hand of Salvation, mostly Hand of Salvation is actually going on off tanks now, so they can continue their fully Vengeance DPS. Good Paladins are using it on the off tanks, and now it reduces all threat, which is a wonderful change. The Priest, this is a good one. The Priests were in a dire state. They started to find their own little place towards the end of 5.1. Even Discipline found itself in a good place towards the end of 5.1. With particularly a boring playstyle. I think most people will agree. Although I will do a video on the Disc Priest so you guys can get an understanding of what those changes were. Atonement healing range has been increased to 40 yards up from 15. This is a biggie. This is a big change. The Atonement healing was garbage on the Disc Priest. I did some demonstrations of it in the other videos. Atonement was just not up to scratch compared to, say, the Monk DPS healing. Atonement has been buffed to try and bring it back more into line, giving you an extra 40 yards range, so it is healing people instead of just topping up the melee. For Holy, they did get their chakras now persist through death, and they just got a flat-out 10% extra healing. Serenity now increases single target healing by 25% up from 15, and Sanctuary now increases area healing by 25% up from 15. So a flat out just healing buff. There's nothing changing in your gearing, your playstyle, or anything like that. Everything you cast is still the same, but pretty much you've just got a flat out 10% extra healing for your holy healing, which is very, very nice indeed. We were saying that they just weren't getting the output compared to how they were playing earlier, so that's a nice little change for them as well. There's a nice buff to Discipline Priest, again affected by Inner Focus. Cast while Spirit Shell is active, now fully apply the crit effect heal to the shield provided. This isn't the kind of change I was hoping for Disc. The Atonement change is welcome, no doubt about that, but I would just like to see much more variation in the Discipline playstyle rather than just spamming Spirit Shell continuously. It's not as fun as one might imagine to just press one spell over and over and over again. The Rogue changes. Some stuff that affects your DPS. The cooldown of Vanish has been reduced to 2 minutes, was 3 minutes. So you can now get extra Vanishes back into Stealth to proc your first tier talents to get some extra DPS out. So this is a nice change to DPS and also for those get out of jail free Vanishes that you might need. Seal Fate will now only activate when melee combo generating abilities. It was proccing off various things that it shouldn't have. This shouldn't cause too much of a DPS downgrade. Everything should be fine. There should be no issue with that. Other than that, there was no other major changes that affect PvE DPS for the rogues. Everything else is pretty much normal. Do note though that the energy cost of kick and in fact interrupts across the board have been reduced in their cost for those that have a cost associated with them. Like for instance, the energy cost of kick for the rogues was reduced to 10. It was 15. 15. Kicks are so important. They really, really are. With this mass change, I would probably expect to see something involving interrupts coming up in 5.2, just to make sure it's a little bit easier. Blizzard tends to prepare well in advance for this kind of stuff, so be prepared to do some kicking. The Warrior, nothing new here. Everybody knew the Warrior changes which were coming. Avatar now no longer grants immunity to movement impairing effects, and now instead instantly breaks movement impairing effects. This ability also no longer generates additional rage while active. Okay, no longer generates additional rage. Its duration has increased to 24 seconds from 20 seconds. This isn't a major problem for a lot of warriors. A lot of warriors have been swimming in rage already, which is no big deal at all. It's more about PvP stuff, as well as the change to Glyph of Gag Order, so it's no longer effective against players. So be aware, a lot of people were moaning that the silence of Glyph of Gag Order was important to them in PvE. It still works on non-player characters. NPCs are still affected by Glyph of Gag Order. It's no longer useful in PvP. Don't panic, don't worry. Warlock's got some rather quality of life issue changes as well, which wasn't too bad. I know as of filming this, I haven't done the Warlock videos yet, but don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm getting there shortly. I'm getting there this week, in fact. So a lot of auras were changed, like Aura of Elements and Aura of Enfeeblement can now be dispelled, which is pretty cool. A lot of people just couldn't get rid of it, which is a pain in the ass. Demonic Gateway can now be activated, which is so good. I walked into several Demonic Gateways on the beta servers, which was a pain in the ass on occasion when you're running around in a raid environment. Banish is now effective against Avaricians. The big changes to Rain of Fire. Rain of Fire no longer causes a stun. Aftermath will now grant Rain of Fire damage over time to generate Burning Embers. Rain of Fire no longer requires Immolate. Rain of Fire damage over time will now hit every 1 second, down from 2 seconds. The damage animation for the damage over time effect will no longer always display. This is kind of like a move to try and give Rain of Fire a purpose again compared to Harvest Life. Harvest Life was just so dominant. They're moving away from it and trying to get Rain of Fire more involved and make it a little bit easier and still keep DPS nice and high. Another good change for Destruction was Conflagrate will now generate Burning Embers. It's a flat-out destruction buff. Pretty much. There's just a nice destruction buff there, generating more Burning Embers, having to cast less useless spells like Immolate on a mad AoE pack, all that kind of stuff, just to get destruction back into the game a little bit and have it play out instead of the Demonology Affliction spam. Quite nice to see the Warlocks getting some sort of balance issue there, just to make sure all 3 specs. It's nice to see Blizzard taking care of all 3 specs. Death Knights received no major PvE changes at all. All they did was Blood DKs in PvP will now no longer get the buff to Death Strike, but we don't really care about PvP. We don't give a shit. Druids. The last one I want to touch on is Druids. Is a new ability was added for the Guardian Druids called Tooth and Claw. This ability causes auto attacks to have a chance to empower the Druid's next Maul. Empowered Maul reduce the damage dealt by the target's next attack by a percentage. Okay, that's it. Guardian Druids obtain this ability at level 32. It changes nothing about your playstyle at all. There's really no changes whatsoever. This thing will just happen. You will spot it, and it's just going to be a nice way of reducing the damage incoming on the Feral Druids. Feral Druids, Guardian Druids, I should say. We're taking quite a nasty little burst there, so it's no big deal at all. The other stuff, there was just Symbiosis changes. A cast time reduced to 2 seconds, so it's not some big major cast before the fight. You can't cast it anyway while you're fighting. And also some Symbiosis changes towards the tanks, really. Some tanks weren't getting the major benefits. So Survival Instincts is once again granted to Brewmasters. Might have Ursoc to the Blood DK, Savage Defense to the Prot Warriors. And Bark Skin is once again granted to the Prot Paladins and now costs 1 Holy Power. That's pretty much it. The cooldown of Stampeding Roar, this is one that's pretty important. Is Stampeding Shout provided by Symbiosis has been reduced to 5 minutes. I was often given Stampeding Roar on the beta realms and I was very annoyed to see it had a 10-minute cooldown. 5 minutes is still not great, but whatever, what are you going to do? Other than that, the only minor change I want to note is that the duration of Solar Beam has been reduced to 8 seconds. Shouldn't be too much of an issue in PvE. If you're doing some root Solar Beam and helping your tanks out, then that's all good, okay? So that's your changes to 5.1. Again, no major issues. The only one I really want to point out again is the sort of rebalancing of the Mistweaver monks. It's not a nerf. Don't cry about it. Mistweavers were OP. There's no doubt about that, especially with their AoE healing. Combustion changes, which again aren't anything major, and the Hunter changes. I expect to take a further deeper look into the Hunter changes when I have chance. Alright, ballers, you take it easy and have a great day.